What's good? Listen, one of my patrons asked me a question, so I thought I'd answer it on here for everybody because it was a really good question. Someone asked me why some men have such poor communication styles in relationships but are well educated, or poor communication styles in dating but are well educated. I'll try to keep this quick and simple. The reason is because relationship or dating communication isn't often a sign, symptom, or result of education. It's a sign, symptom, and result of emotional health, emotional vulnerability, and emotional availability, a concept that challenges a lot of women as they choose men, because they seek out men who are emotionally unavailable because of some of the alleles and some of the character traits that comes with that they're attracted to. This is why so many of you find men who are terrible communicators, but you are in love with, or you're falling for, or you can't get enough of. When a man is emotionally unavailable, he's not a great communicator. When he's not emotionally healthy, he's not a great communicator. When he's not emotionally vulnerable or willing to be with you, he's not a great communicator. To make sense of this, the best thing I can think of, or the best example I can think of, is this recent Jill Scott clip. She's on the Breakfast Club, and Charlamagne asks her something in relationship to when a man can, lead her or dominate her or tell her what to do, so to speak. I'll just play the clip so you understand what I'm talking about.
I can walk all over you. And who wants that? Nobody wants that.
And then you're like, I'm dating a bitch ass, and I don't really,
Why?
No respect.
I say it like this. If you can tell me what to do, then you can tell me what to do. But if you can't tell me what to do, you can't tell me what to do.
Damn,
Does that make sense?
I want to tweet that, but it ain't gonna.
Now, in speaking about what type of man can check her, or who gets to check her, tell her what to do, who she'll submit to and be that level of feminine with, she got a lot of support from women. Women immediately understood exactly what she meant, right? It was a big ooh, ah moment, right? It was also a point of contention. A lot of people were arguing about it on the internet, trying to figure out what was appropriate, if it was healthy for a relationship and all those types of things. Obviously, there were a lot of men who didn't like the quote, didn't like the clip. And there were some men who didn't mind it at all because they're the type of guys that usually get that level of authority granted to them by the women they date. In fact, they only deal with women who grant them that level of authority. But in the same way, right? A man who can communicate with you, who will communicate with you, will communicate with you. A man who will not communicate with you will not communicate with you, right? He doesn't care enough about you. He doesn't respect you enough. Just like some women date some men that they don't respect enough to get guidance from or to be led by in whatever way you believe leadership is. This is not about leadership and what it constitutes and all of that. But some women do follow the protocol. They do follow the program of some men, while those same women are completely uncooperative and completely rebellious in other relationships. And if I'm adding my observation to it, usually of the healthier minded men. In all of my years of being a relationship coach, the women who have this mindset are usually only giving that level of authority to men who are a little bit more toxic, a little bit more destructive and damaging, who are a little bit more narcissistic. Women equate that authority and that power to some level of masculinity that's, at the apex. But to be honest, it's actually just a man's self-service. It's a man's narcissism that causes him to dictate over someone. But that's a whole nother video. I'm not here to talk about whether or not Jill Scott's mindset is healthy. I'm here to explain why communication is so spotty with some guys, or why they communicate with some women, but not others. In the same spirit of what Jill Scott said, some men will select a woman based on how much they respect her, how much they admire her, how much they trust her. And those men who are educated or capable of communicating choose to communicate those vulnerabilities to her because there's a different level of comfort. You can sit still in your masculinity with certain women and still communicate your emotions and still be vulnerable and still be an open and considerate communicator. That's a level of masculinity that some women don't allow us to get to. Some women don't bring that out of men. And it's not about those women being inferior. It's about the way that man sees the woman. Usually a woman who's settling won't listen to her man the same way she'll listen to the man that she's chosen. Just like sometimes a man who's settling won't be vulnerable or open up to a woman that he's settling for, like the woman he's chosen or like the woman he has desired and wanted and dreamed of. That vulnerability, that level of duty to the relationship only comes when people have a true desire to be with someone. When someone has chosen you above all others, when you bring that out of a person. Now, I will say this, it's not your fault if you don't bring that out of a person. You can only be who you are. And some women might not be able to ignite that in some men but they can in others. Just like some women would let a man check them and listen and go for it and feel more feminine because of it, some men are made to feel more masculine and more whole communicating with some women, cooperating with some women, sharing power with some women. When a man refuses to communicate, that's a part of the power dynamic a lot of times. Having a key to a locked door in order to maintain a certain dynamic, but also to protect themselves. Again, I'm not here to talk about whether or not it's healthy to be like that, but to draw the parallel that the complexity of women, while it gets support from other women, is not so different than the complexity of men that many of you despise and hate, that many of you have in your minds fallen victim to, and some quite literally have fallen victim to. Human beings are complicated. So if you've supported the Jill Scott tape, then you know exactly why some men don't communicate. Again, it's a symptom of emotional vulnerability, emotional availability, and emotional health. Far too often, women choose men who are not emotionally healthy, who are not emotionally vulnerable, and who are not emotionally mature, and who are definitely not emotionally available. And then they wonder why they don't get good communication from these guys, because they're not the one. And or that man would only do that with his dream woman. He'd do whatever it takes with his dream woman. Oftentimes, just like a woman who selected a man out of need and not desire, she must learn to participate in allowing him certain authorities. It's an adjustment to share power with someone that you don't desire at a certain level. If a man is man enough, you'll let him fill in the blank. To a man, if a woman is trustworthy enough, if she's desirable enough, if he wants her enough, he will fill in the blank. That's why so many of you can't get phone calls, can't have conversations, can't hash things out, can't discuss anything, can't disagree without it becoming an argument or a blow up or some kind of separation, some kind of break in the relationship. Can't get a man to talk about his feelings or acknowledge yours. To Jill Scott's point, you can't tell him what to do. When you get with someone who won't communicate, who won't be vulnerable, who's not emotionally available, you have a decision to make. Keep trying to fit this square peg into a round hole, or move on to someone who sees values in you that would allow them to be that level of vulnerable, that level of cooperative, that level of engaged and committed to the process of having a healthy relationship. Just because a man's educated doesn't make him a great communicator. Some women open up at a different level to some men, the men they desire, the men they want the most. They do whatever it takes. They're completely open. The same can be said of some men. Except you're not telling him what to do. He's telling you how he feels. He's discussing those vulnerabilities with you. He's open to being hurt by you. So he communicates. All things equal, these are very similar motivating factors for how a person performs in a relationship. I hope this helps. If you're interested in making video requests yourself or watching my bonus content, join me on Patreon. If you need one-on-one coaching, the link's down below. I'll get with y'all later.